Hey, that worked. Bada bang, bada boom. Do a what I call a dry run and practicing without any. See, I put it backwards. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. Hey guys, welcome back. Episode 19 of our Pontiac rebuild. So close to the finish line. So today we're going to talk about putting your intake manifold on. And it's pretty straightforward, but there are some things you have to look out for. So if you're new here, check it out. That's how we got here. Kind of blew up the motor, but had to take it out of the car to fix a bad lifter that got stuck in the bore. Had to replace the camshaft, but we painted some parts on the way, and now we're here. Whew! So welcome back. If you're currently subscribed, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and do that because you don't want to miss the rest. And I have a couple surprises up my sleeve a few videos from now, so stay tuned for that. Let's get started. So here's the deal. You're going to need that one last thing in your gasket set. It's that little tiny donut that goes on the front of the intake manifold. You're also going to need your new head gaskets for the intake manifold. You're getting some RTV, obviously socket set, your bolts, your intake manifold, duh. And if you have aluminum heads, you're going to need some anti-seize, because like I said, I've always said, if you're bolting into an aluminum part, you need to use anti-seize so it doesn't gall and you start stripping threads super easy. Whew, brutal. So to get things started, what I recommend, oh, you also get some thread chasers. So let me show you something here. So clearly this is our gasket. It does not fit. You see that? On the top edges and the bottom edges, we actually have to trim these today. But before we get there, if you haven't done so already when you put your heads in, is you want to make sure we chase these threads for the mounting bolts. So like on this side, remember we had our tape that ran across the whole length? All you have to do is just tear off sections where the bolts are and clean out those bolts, and then we can proceed, because in order to proceed we have to take our valve covers off, because like this shows here, they're not going to fit, and we don't want to scratch our valve covers when we put our intake manifold in. So I'm going to go ahead and clean all the bolts, and we'll be right back. All right, team, just in case you were wondering or you missed the last episode, this is what a thread chaser looks like. This is not a tap. This is purely meant for cleaning out the threads and your mating part. Now we did this on the March serpentine belt bracket. Remember, it was painted, so I had to clean out that paint before I put a bolt in. So that's what a thread chaser is. You can typically get this at any part supply house, OPGI, whatever, and they're really handy. So I'm gonna go ahead and just finish the bolts up. I'll be right back. Okay guys, here comes the fun part. Took the valve cover off, obviously, and now we're going to check the fitment of our gasket. So, those of you who have ported heads like myself will notice right away that you're going to have to trim the gasket. We're going to have to trim the top half. Remember, the valve cover touches the valve cover, so I'm going to pick a midway point, and same with the bottom. Because it doesn't sit flush with the head, it's touching the valley band. You're going to have to trim the bottom off too. So what we're going to do is take our green tape, and we're going to place our gasket where we want it. And be mindful of the bolt holes. So these middle spars typically don't get touched when they do the porting because it's just such a thin wall. They usually take it from the outer. Now, if your intake manifold is not port matched, you're probably fine. This probably matches your current intake manifold, but mine are port matched. So it matches the same profile as the ports in the head. So I'm gonna go ahead and make sure my My mounting bolts are lined up in the middle. The outer ones are bigger. And I'm going to tape it down. Just to keep it in place. Like so. I'm even going to tell myself that this is the driver's side. And now I'm going to go around and see where I need to remove material, and I'm going to mark a line. I'm going to get a straight edge to do that. I found a straight edge. This is actually one of my those angles for cutting basically with wood and carpentry. But you can find anything in the shop that has a nice straight edge. And I'm just going to go around and figure out where my cut lines are. I also got a sharper pen. So like I mentioned on the top and bottom of the gasket, I'm just going to pick a halfway point. And basically put a line across. And I'm going to do that top, bottom. And then I'm going to go ahead and see where I need to modify the inside of the ports. It's only on this one is this edge and this edge. And these two inside edges. I don't have to worry about the middle or the top or bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, mark it up for both sides, and then I'll go back to the workbench and show you what I'll do to cut. While I'm here, one more thing. I'm actually going to use the bottom of the head as the edge to reference when I mark the bottom of the gasket. That makes it super easy. Like that. Alright guys, back at the bench. So we can see our lines are drawn, and I prefer to use a razor blade, but you can probably get away with an X-Acto knife, especially on the tight radius here. I just picked my steel ruler that came out of this guy, and I'm using that as my guide. And I'm just gonna see how we do here. Hey, that worked. Bada bang, bada boom. So, always nice to have a fresh razor blade. So I'm going to do that for the rest in the inside corners, and I'll meet you back at the block for a test fit. Let's see how we did. Oh yeah, so I got a little corner there. It's right on the edge. It's okay to be inside, to have a little bit of metal showing. I would rather have that to cause turbulent flow than to be an impedance to airflow. Because when you have it on the intake side, you want some turbulence because it mixes up the fuel better. But that looks awesome. So that's nice straight edges at the top, nice straight edges at the bottom. We'll go ahead and do the other side, and we'll get it on. Alright team, now that we're here, what you want to do is do what I call a dry run. We did a dry run on the Valley Pan. Remember that? Because we have RTV on there. We want to see where our gaps were. You want to do a dry run here because, frankly, the intake manifold is heavy. And if the engine's in your car, it's kind of hard to manhandle. So I always recommend taking your intake manifold and practicing without any... See, I put it backwards. Oh my gosh. Speaking of practice. So put your intake manifold in, practice lining it up, just dropping it in. And you can, if you're in the right position, you can see through the bolt holes right here and see if you're lined up. Just to get used to feeling of dropping it in. Of course, I did it backwards, so that was hilarious. Now that we've done it a couple times, we need to start applying some RTV. So the back of the timing chain cover right here, this seal, put a little bit of RTV there. You want to put a tiny bit of RTV around here. That's the water jacket. That'll help the gasket stick. Now if you recall, when we did the timing chain cover, I use this stuff, which is pretty cool. It's like a glue stick, but it's for dressing your gasket. What I'm going to do is add a little bit here and here, and that will get the gasket to stick. I'll let it set up a little bit, and once it's set up, I'll add some more RTV right around here, just a really thin amount because we want a good seal around the water jacket. And on the opposite side, and on the business end of our intake manifold, we have that rubber gasket to put in here. So I'm going to RTV and put the rubber gasket in, and then we already have RTV on there. Put our bolts in. So I'm going to drop it in and put our bolts in hand tight, and then we're going to put our locking thread. Okay, here we go. All right, guys, so do one final check. Make sure you got your RTV on the top of your gaskets. Make sure your gaskets are in the right spot, because you can still move them around a little bit. It's actually an okay idea to let them set up so they don't slip when you put the intake manifold on. And it's okay. Take your time. So now we're going to drop the manifold in. I think I'm pretty good right there. So I'm going to go ahead and put all the bolts in finger tight. And we'll come back and we'll put our first torquing method is going to be on this bolt right here. Let's not forget, we need to put anti-seize on all of our bolts before they go in, because these are aluminum heads. If you have stock heads, you don't have to worry about it as much, but aluminum heads for sure. Okay, team. When I said finger tight, I actually meant barely even touching, because we still have to torque down our front fastener first. And if you remember, we talked about this last time, is you have to make sure before you put your front end bracket assembly on that you have room for this key. So I had to cut away at the gasket to get down to the divider plate. I got my anti-seize on there, and here we go. And once I get this going, we're going to torque this down to 15 pound-feet. And what that'll do is it'll pull the intake manifold over so it seals right here. And as you tighten it, you'll notice the RTV will start squeezing out, and that's exactly what you want to see all the way around. Right now we got our front bolt in and tightened. We pulled the manifold over. We can start going around and tightening our intake manifold bolts. You're supposed to torque them to 40 foot-pounds, but it's really difficult to get a torque wrench on these inside bolts, at least on this manifold. Stock manifold's 40, so I'm just going to go crisscross fashion until I get adequate seal, and we'll call it good. Oh yeah, manifold's back on. Whew, we're getting somewhere. Thanks for hanging out today, guys. Subscribe if you haven't. Next episode, we're going to do the distributor, spark plugs, making sure our timing's right before we put the distributor in, stuff like that, little details. Then we have to put the engine mounts on and put it back in the car. Oh my God, I can't wait. And then after that, I have a surprise. So stay tuned. You know the drill. Build them fast and drive them faster. See ya.